Welcome to the deep dive. So, you send us your sources, and we've done the digging, pulling out the key insights, the stuff that really matters so you can get up to speed quickly.
Yep, cutting through the noise.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into the second chapter of the book of James. It's all about this idea that faith shouldn't just be internal, right? It needs to show up in how we actually live.
Yeah.
Faith in action.
A classic theme.
You shared some great material breaking down this chapter. Our mission today is, well, to explore what this ancient text says about faith and life and, honestly, why it still feels so relevant.
It really does.
Because it's easy to say you believe something, but James seems to ask, okay, so what? Does it actually change anything? Let's get into it.
Well, the thing about James 2, it starts so grounded. No floating theology here.
Yeah.
He jumps right into a real-life situation.
Right, the rich person and the poor person walking into a gathering.
Exactly, how they're treated differently. And that contrast, that's the setup for his whole argument about what real faith looks like.
Yeah, and he's blunt about it. My brothers and sisters, believers, must not show favoritism. Pretty direct.
No messing around.
And his reason, that's not the heart of God. It kind of stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? If you claim to follow someone who lifted up the marginalized, how can you then, create your own pecking order based on clothes or status?
And it's bigger than just church gatherings, right? That's the key.
Oh, definitely.
Think about work, who gets the opportunities, or schools. Are all kids really heard the same way? Even just like socially, who do we gravitate towards?
It forces that self-check, doesn't it, for you listening? Do I treat everyone the same? With the same respect? Or do I subconsciously favor people who kind of look the part?
That's the uncomfortable question he poses.
Then verses 5 to 7, they flip the script a bit. This idea that God often chooses the poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith.
Yeah, it's this inversion of values. Heaven's currency is different from Earth's, basically.
So earthly status doesn't impress God much.
James seems to suggest it can even be a hindrance sometimes. He's not saying being poor is inherently better, but that wealth isn't the measure of what matters spiritually.
And then the warning, if you show favoritism, you're actually dishonoring the very people God honors.
Ouch, yeah. It makes you think, who am I maybe ignoring or looking down on that God actually sees as incredibly valuable?
Who have you overlooked that God might be using? That's a tough one to sit with. Okay, then verses 8 to 11. This gets a little technical maybe, but it's crucial. The idea that breaking one part of the law means you've broken it all.
Right, he brings up the royal law, love your neighbor as yourself, which comes from the Old Testament, Leviticus.
And showing favoritism, which might seem like just a small social mistake.
James argues it's actually a fundamental violation of that core command. It's not minor. It cuts right to the heart of love. If you can't love impartially, are you really loving your neighbor?
It totally challenges how we often rank sins, Like, well, at least I'm not doing that bad thing.
We compare ourselves to others.
But James says, hang on, God's standard isn't a pick and mix list. It's this big principle of love. And any failure there, even seemingly small ones like favoritism, is a failure against the whole standard.
So it pushes you to ask, am I measuring myself against other people's flaws or against Christ's standard of perfect love? Big difference.
Huge difference. And that flows right into the next bit, verses 12 and 13, about mercy triumphing over judgment.
Yeah, he talks about being judged by the law that gives freedom, which again seems to point back to this law of love, not rigid condemnation.
But there's a condition, isn't there?
A very clear one. Judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Basically, the mercy you receive is connected to the mercy you show.
That's confronting, because we all want grace for ourselves, right? We want understanding when we mess up.
Absolutely. But are we just as quick to offer that same grace to others? Or do we tend to judge?
James is calling out that potential hypocrisy. It makes you reflect, are my words, my thoughts about others, are they generally leaning towards mercy, or is there a hidden layer of judgment there?
Is your mouth full of mercy or quiet criticism? A good gut check. Because as James implies, how can we expect mercy if we're not willing to extend it? It's deeply interconnected.
Okay, so we've seen favoritism is out, love is the standard, mercy is key. And then we hit probably the most famous line from James 2, verses 14 to 17. Faith without works is dead.
Bam.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. This is where he gets intensely practical.
He uses that analogy, right? Seeing someone cold and hungry.
They're just saying, oh, hope you get warm and find some food. See ya.
Yeah.
Without actually doing anything to help.
He asks, what good is that? What good is claiming faith if it doesn't lead to any action?
Exactly. The point isn't that our actions save us, but that real living faith naturally produces action. It's the evidence, the fruit.
It's not just about showing up somewhere once a week or saying you believe certain doctrines. It's got to leak out into your everyday life, how you respond to actual needs.
It really challenges you to think, if my faith suddenly grew legs, what would actually change in my daily routine? What
Yeah.
would look different?
That's a powerful question. What would change if my faith had feet? And he doubles down on this, doesn't he, in verses 18 and 19?
Oh, yeah. This is maybe the most startling part. He says, even the demons believe there's one God,
Wow.
and they shudder. So just believing the right facts, having the correct theology in your head, James says that's not enough. Even demons have that.
So intellectual agreement isn't the same as saving faith.
Apparently not. The difference, he implies, is obedience, action, a changed life that flows from that belief. It's not just mental agreement. It's trust that leads to movement.
It makes you ask, is my faith just like an internal thing, a
Yeah.
private opinion, or is it actually visible? Is it producing movement in my life?
Precisely. And to drive this home, he gives two big examples. First, Abraham, verses 20 to 24.
The father of faith himself.
Right. And James points to that incredibly difficult moment, Abraham's willingness to offer Isaac. He says that action showed his faith was real. In fact, James says his faith was made complete or perfected by what he did.
So it wasn't just that Abraham believed God could do something. He acted on that belief, even when it was terrifying and seemed counterintuitive.
Exactly. That act of obedience, that radical trust, demonstrated the reality of his faith and, in a way, deepened it.
It suggests that obedience, especially when it's hard, is actually part of how faith grows and becomes tangible, which leads to a personal question maybe. What act of obedience, big or small, might God be prompting you toward right now?
Good question. Then he shifts quite dramatically to Rahab, verse 25.
Yeah, Rahab the prostitute, not exactly who you'd expect to be held up as a faith hero right after Abraham.
Right. But James highlights her actions. She hid the Israelite spies, risking her own life. Why? Because she believed their God, the God of Israel, was the true God.
Her actions proved her faith.
Yes. It shows that it's not about having a perfect past or the right pedigree. Rahab's background was, let's say, complicated, but her present action, her courageous choice based on her belief, is what James highlights.
That's actually really encouraging. It means your past doesn't automatically define or disqualify you. It's about your obedience now.
Exactly. What matters is acting on the faith you have today. And Rahab's example really asks, are you willing to risk something, comfort, reputation, maybe just convenience, to actually live out what you say you believe?
So Abraham, the respected patriarch, and Rahab, the outsider, both demonstrate the same core principle.
That's it. Real faith isn't passive. It's not just thinking the right thoughts. It's active, it's engaged, it shows up in how we treat people and how we respond to God's leading.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the message from James chapter 2 seems crystal clear. There's this inseparable link, isn't there, between truly believing something and actually living it out.
Absolutely. You can't really have one without the other, not according to James, especially when it comes to showing love, showing mercy, treating people fairly.
It's about practical action flowing from genuine conviction.
Couldn't say it better. Belief and behavior have to align.
So as we finish this deep dive, here's something to maybe chew on. Thinking about everything we've discussed, the favoritism, the mercy, faith needing action, consider just one specific area in your life this week. Where could you intentionally make your actions line up more closely with your beliefs?
What's one tangible step, however small, to move your faith from just a thought or feeling into doing something?
And maybe take a moment later to think back on those questions we touched on. How does this challenge from James sit with you? How might it apply to your own situation?
Because figuring out this connection between what we believe and how we live, that's not really a destination you arrive at, is it?
No, definitely feels more like an ongoing journey. A really important one, though, with big implications for how we actually navigate the world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.